The UNSS Mercy Dawn was the pride of Earth, not for its power, but for its purpose. It was the largest hospital ship ever built, over 5 kilometers long, glowing with white and blue lights, and surrounded by an energy field that shimmered like a promise. It drifted near the edge of the neutral zone, where the fires of the Grantari conflict burned the hardest. Humans had no part in that war, yet the ship treated soldiers and civilians from every side. To the galaxy, it was a floating miracle. Its halls were filled with doctors, nurses, medics, volunteers, people who came not to fight, but to heal. Children born on the ship were named after peace, hope, and starlight. For many across the stars, the Mercy Dawn was the first and last place they felt safe. But peace, it seemed, was a fragile thing. Without warning, a fleet of dark, triangular warships appeared on the edge of the system. No communication, no identification. They flew in formation, cold and silent, like shadows, given form. At first, no one on the Mercy Dawn panicked. After all, even in war, the ancient galactic accords protected medical ships. Everyone believed the attackers would see the ship's colors, recognize its status, and pass by. But then the targeting alarms screamed. 37 warheads launched, in less than a minute. The ship's automated defenses tried to respond, but they weren't built for war. They were shields made for debris, not missiles. In under 3 minutes, the Mercy Dawn was torn apart in the blackness of space. Fire spread through oxygen lines. Surgical bays crumbled. The cryo wards exploded, killing hundreds who had already been clinging to life. A child's voice, caught on the final transmission, whispered, "Why are they shooting at us?" before the signal cut off. News of the attack raced through Earth's colonies, and then to the heart of Sol itself. 12,478 souls. Lost, civilians, medics, innocents. There were no survivors. At first, there was disbelief. No one wanted to accept that someone could attack a hospital ship. The Galactic Council called for calm. The Zarn Dominion, whose space the fleet had passed through, claimed it was a rogue group not under their control. But Earth didn't wait for apologies. They didn't ask for names. They didn't hold a vote. In a quiet, sealed room beneath the oceans of Europa, the highest command of Earth's defense network activated Protocol Ultima, total response. It was a law written long ago, one that humanity hoped never to use. It stated that any unprovoked attack on a humanitarian vessel would be treated as an act of war not just against Earth, but against every value humanity stood for. Within an hour, the beacons lit across Mars, Titan, and the orbital shipyards above Earth. The fleet of Fury was called from deep space, vessels silent until now, their hulls cloaked in black alloy, armed not just with weapons, but with resolve. These were not ships built to conquer. They were built to end wars. At the head of them stood Admiral Kira Thorne, a commander known for her patience, but also for her precision. She gave no speech, no threats, just one order: find them. Across the stars, the galaxy watched and waited. Some hoped Earth would show mercy. Others feared what would happen if they didn't. But everyone knew one thing for sure. Humanity had shown the galaxy compassion for generations. They built homes for refugees, healed enemies without asking questions, and sent aid to worlds that once tried to conquer them. But this time, something had changed. A line had been crossed, and when the fleet of Fury vanished into hyperspace, burning a trail behind them, the message was clear. Earth had stayed silent long enough. The stars remained quiet, but the galaxy was holding its breath. After the destruction of the Mercy Dawn, the Galactic Council quickly called for a summit, their holographic forms flickering with urgency as they gathered in orbit above Drekal Prime. Delegates from dozens of star systems arrived, their faces grave, their words careful. The Council begged Earth for restraint, pleaded for diplomacy. The Zarn Dominion, surrounded by growing pressure, claimed the attack was a terrible mistake, a misfire, a glitch, an action by a rogue admiral no longer. Under their command, they offered words, sorrowful speeches, and promises of investigations. But Earth, still mourning the dead, had grown tired of words. Inside Earth's United Assembly, the chamber fell silent as Admiral Kira Thorne, dressed in her black command uniform, stood at the center, her presence sharp and still like a drawn blade. She listened without interruption, her eyes cold, her hands steady behind her back. And when the final speaker finished suggesting another round of talks, she simply said one word: no. That was all. No shouting, no long declaration, just a single word that echoed louder than any threat. The meaning was clear. Earth had been patient, had given peace every chance. Now, that chance was gone. Within the hour, the Terran Fury Armada, hidden in deep space docks and moonshadow bases, began to awaken. Engines warmed, hulls shimmered as cloaking fields dropped, and warships that had slept for decades rose into formation. 42 ships, each one unique in design and purpose, formed the heart of Earth's might. From the massive dreadnought, TNS Valiant, to the sleek strike cruiser Phantom Wing, they moved like a living storm preparing to break. Across Earth's colonies, civilians watched the skies as blue-lit ships passed overhead in perfect silence. Children asked their parents if war was coming. Some parents answered yes, others couldn't speak. In orbit, pilots ran final checks while battle AIs synced their minds with the command grid. Fleet Command broadcast no rallying cry, no music, no flags. Instead, Admiral Thorne gave quiet instructions from her flagship, the Resolute, calmly, guiding her officers through launch orders. Every crew member knew what was at stake. The Mercy Dawn wasn't just a ship, it was a promise, and someone had shattered it. As the countdown reached 0, the Terran Fury Armada vanished in streaks of white fire as jump drives ignited, launching them into unknown space with surgical precision. They weren't heading into open war. They were heading to hunt. No one outside Earth knew the exact coordinates. The targets would be chosen with care. There would be no civilian harm, no reckless destruction. Earth did not seek revenge. They sought justice, and they would deliver it with control, not chaos. Meanwhile, fear spread in whispers across the galaxy. Systems near the Zarn Dominion began preparing for fallout. Smugglers, diplomats, and traders all raced to get out of the way. Even neutral planets grew anxious, unsure if this would be the start of something larger. Yet among the fear, something else was growing: respect. For centuries, humans had been viewed as the youngest race, idealistic, overly kind, too soft to survive in a cold galaxy. But now, they stood tall. Not because of violence, but because they refused to let evil go unanswered. They would not strike blindly, but they would strike. The calm before the storm had ended, and the silence that followed was not peace. It was the moment when every tyrant, every warlord, every hidden power realized Earth had changed. The Fleet of Fury wasn't coming to negotiate. They weren't coming to conquer. They were coming because a line had been crossed, and now the stars would remember what it meant when humanity said, "Enough." The darkness of space offered no warning before the first strike came. It was quiet, almost elegant, just a flash of light, then silence, as a Zarn military satellite blinked out of existence. A moment later, another vanished. Then 2 more. The Terran Fury Armada had arrived, and it did not waste time. There were no warnings, no demands. Earth had gathered the best minds, the most advanced machines, and the most disciplined tacticians. And now they were in motion. Admiral Kira Thorne's orders were clear: no civilian harm, no collateral damage, Only precise surgical action. The Earth fleet moved like a blade through soft cloth, cutting with perfect aim, never more than needed. The Zarn Dominion, once so confident in its fortress worlds and sensor webs, found its defenses falling apart piece by piece. Shield generators failed without explanation. Weapon arrays turned cold. Communications between command posts were cut, sometimes in mid-sentence. In many cases, the Zarn soldiers didn't even know they were under attack until their screens went dark. Earth's ships, guided by powerful AIs capable of calculating thousands of outcomes per second, moved in flawless coordination. Some were remote-piloted. Others were manned by veterans trained in zero-gravity combat. Every ship was linked to a vast tactical mind built on Luna's data cores, a silent commander that never slept, never hesitated. Alongside the machines were the psychic defense officers, a new branch of humanity trained to sense enemy intent, to block mental scans, and in some cases to predict the future just a second ahead, enough to dodge a missile or save a life. With their help, Earth didn't just react, they anticipated. Inside Zarn outposts, confusion turned to fear. Soldiers found their systems locking down. Supply stations went offline. Unmanned drones turned inward, disabling command structures from within. It wasn't a war in the old sense. There were no messy invasions, no bombings, no screaming fighters. It was more like watching a storm pass through a field and leave only the strongest trees standing. Yet Earth took great care to avoid civilian zones. Surveillance satellites scanned every heat signature, every power reading, making sure the attacks touched only military assets. Human mercy remained, even in this storm. That's what made it more terrifying. Because even while showing restraint, Earth's power was undeniable. The Zarn Dominion had once boasted about its unbreakable border, its fortress moons and deep space cannons. Now, those same leaders sent desperate messages to their allies, claiming Earth was using some kind of unknown technology. But it wasn't magic. It was preparation. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. They were known as healers, diplomats, scientists. And yes, they were those things. But buried beneath that kindness was resolve, forged in the fires of Earth's own history. A race that had survived wars, disasters, near extinction, had learned to wield peace like a sword. And now, that sword had been drawn. In orbit over the shattered Zarn relay station Gamma 9, the TNS Valiant broadcast a single message on open channels. To those who value peace, stand aside. To those who target the helpless, we are coming. That message was heard not just in Zarn space, but across the stars. Pirates changed routes. Warlords paused their campaigns. Even empires that had ignored Earth before began quietly studying their maps, wondering where Earth would move next. But Admiral Thorne wasn't after empires. She wasn't here for conquest. Her fleet had a single mission: to cut out the heart of the power that dared target a hospital ship, and do it cleanly, quickly, and without mercy for those who ordered the strike. The blade had been unsheathed, and now it moved without hesitation. The galaxy had always seen humanity as soft, but now they understood. Kindness was Earth's choice. Strength was always there, waiting. The ruins of the Zarn frontline station were still smoldering when the transmission first flickered into life. It wasn't the usual communication from a fleet or a commander. It wasn't even a formal message. It was something far more painful. A haunting, looping recording, sent across all frequencies without the permission of the Zarn warlords. The Mercy Dawn, moments before its destruction, had captured it. A voice, young and full of innocence, speaking words that could never be forgotten. It was a child's voice, trembling but clear. "Why are they shooting at us? We're here to help." The words echoed in the cold vacuum of space, heard by billions across the galaxy. The voice didn't ask for revenge or even an explanation. It only asked why. a simple question that pierced the hearts of anyone listening. And behind the child's words. The recording continued, faint but still there. The distant cries of the wounded, the sound of medics trying desperately to stop the bleeding, the desperate murmurs of those who would never wake up again. Across the stars, planets once indifferent to the conflict began to feel a sharp, unbearable pain. From the fringes of the Terran colonies to the shining cities of the Galactic Alliance, people wept. There were no boundaries now, no side to pick. The tragedy of the Mercy Dawn had become the tragedy of everyone. Even some Zarn soldiers, long trained to see only enemies in others, felt the weight of the recording. On a distant moon in the Zarn Dominion, a handful of soldiers laid down their weapons, unwilling to continue fighting for the warlords who had brought this pain. They had heard it too, the voice of a child asking, "Why?" For the first time, they saw the difference between military orders and the humanity they'd long suppressed. There was a spark of doubt, a flicker of change. But the rulers of Zarn were not so easily swayed. The warlords who had built their power on fear and control, who had used the blood of millions to fuel their empire, would not bow to mercy in their cold command centers. They saw the broadcast as nothing more than a tactic. They believed Earth would stop short, just as they always had. They believed that after all the devastation, after all the destruction, Earth would not go so far as to attack Zarn Prime itself. They were wrong. These warlords still underestimated humanity. They believed Earth's compassion made it weak. They thought that because humans had built their empire with diplomacy, with medicine, and with peace, they would hesitate when confronted with a true war machine like the Zarn Dominion. But Earth's decision had been made long ago. Compassion was not weakness, it was strength. And those who believed they could abuse that strength would be shown the full force of humanity's will. Back in Earth's war rooms, Admiral Kira Thorne had no illusions. The Mercy Dawn was gone. The innocent lives aboard it were lost, and the galaxy had heard the last cries of those who had given everything to heal others. But Earth's response would not be a call for more peace talks, not when the lives of its people and the people they had sworn to protect had been so cruelly ended. As the Resolute and its fleet moved closer to Zarn Prime, the reality was clear. There would be no stopping Earth now. The warlords had miscalculated. The galaxy was not watching from the sidelines anymore. Even those who had once been distant and neutral were beginning to speak out against the Zarn. Some rallied behind Earth, others offered aid in secret, but all knew one thing. This war would not end with a single strike. It would end when Earth had finished its work. And as the fleet of Earth's finest ships moved through the darkened stars, their message was no longer a whisper. It was a thunderclap. You will pay for what you did. The voice of the fallen, of the innocent, had been heard. And now it was time to make sure that voice was never forgotten. The Zarn warlords could dig in all they liked, but Earth had made it clear. They had crossed a line, and there would be no turning back. Not this time. The sight of Earth's fleet hanging in orbit above Zarn Prime was unlike any the galaxy had seen before. 42 ships, silent and heavy with purpose, cast a shadow over the planet below. The atmosphere trembled with the quiet force of Earth's power. Orbital bombardment had already begun. Zarn military compounds, once proud symbols of their dominance, were now crumbling under a relentless assault. From the TNS Valiant to the sleek Phantom Wing, Earth's ships hovered in perfect formation, their energy shields shimmering as they moved in for another strike. But this time, there was no rush, no blind fury. Just cold, calculated pressure. Admiral Kira Thorne stood on the command deck of the Resolute, staring at the holographic map of Zarn Prime, her hands steady, her mind clear. After everything that had happened, the loss of the Mercy Dawn, the destruction of civilian lives, and the bitter betrayal, she knew the time had come to finish this. Yet, she would not strike without offering one final chance. Thorne's voice, rang out, calm but unwavering, as she transmitted a single message across all frequencies. "Evacuate your civilians. You have 24 hours. Then we end this." The message spread like wildfire, cutting through the fear and panic that had already begun to grip the Zarn. For the first time in weeks, the people of Zarn Prime were forced to confront the truth. There was no mercy left. The Zarn government, still clinging to their sense of control, could not risk backing down, not without losing face. And yet, the command to evacuate was undeniable. Earth was not only coming for their military, it was coming for the heart of their power, and it would not stop until they had what they needed. On the ground, panic was immediate. The streets of Zarn Prime erupted in chaos as citizens scrambled for shelter. But something else began to stir in the shadows. Rebel factions, long oppressed under the rule of the Zarn elite, saw the message as a spark, a call to arms. Whispers spread like wildfire in the Undercity, and within hours, small groups of fighters began to organize, preparing to rise against their would-be oppressors. Earth ships had already shown their incredible power, but what the Zarn didn't understand was that this wasn't just a battle of technology. This was a battle of ideals. And the ideals of justice, fairness, and compassion had inspired more than fear. They had ignited hope. The rebels saw this as their chance to overthrow the tyranny they had lived under for centuries. They believed that, with the help of Earth's overwhelming force, they might finally be free. It was a dangerous hope, but it was hope nonetheless. For the first time in a long while, the people of Zarn Prime had something to believe in. As the hours ticked down, the tension only grew. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian, everyone could feel the approaching storm. The skies above, the planet darkened with the shadow of Earth's fleet, and the sound of distant explosions from the orbital bombardment sent waves of dread through Zarn's ruling class. Meanwhile, in the command centers of Zarn's military, leaders fought to maintain control. Messages were sent back and forth, panic rising with every new strike from Earth's ships. But none of the messages could reach the rebels, who now moved, under the cover of chaos. In those final hours, the people who had once been pawns in a far-off war, simply used as tools for the ambitions of others, began to believe they might be able to change their fate. And Earth, humanity, became more than a weapon of war. It became a symbol of what could be possible when justice and compassion joined together. For the first time in a long while, even some within the ranks of the Zarn Dominion began to ask themselves, could this war end differently? Could it end not in complete destruction, but in the transformation of a people? Admiral Thorne knew the danger of this moment. She knew how fragile hope could be. But she also knew that to turn back now would be to dishonor those who had died aboard the Mercy Dawn. And so, as the countdown to the final hour continued, the ships of Earth held steady, waiting to strike, but not before giving Zarn one last chance. The planet's fate rested on that single choice, surrender or fight to the last, knowing Earth would never back down. But for the people of Zarn Prime, the choice had already been made. They were no longer merely subjects of an empire. They were rising at last for their freedom. And Earth? Earth was ready to make sure that rise would not be in vain. As the first light of dawn broke over the darkened surface of Zarn Prime, Earth's fleet descended, swift and deliberate. The atmosphere shimmered with the energy of the fleet's non-lethal suppression waves, silent but powerful. Across the sky, orbital defenses, once proud and formidable, began to crumble. Shields flickered and fell, weapons powered down without a shot fired. The Dominion's mighty defense systems, built over centuries of warfare, were disabled in minutes. But Earth was not here to destroy. They were here to ensure this battle would not be another bloodbath. Admiral Kira Thorne had planned it with precision, every move, every calculation designed to save lives, not end them. Drones, sleek and silent, descended into the heart of Zarn's strongholds. Their missions were clear: infiltrate, disable, and neutralize. The warlord command centers, once the seat of Zarn's power, were brought to their knees without a single casualty. Each drone, guided by Earth's advanced AIs, knew its task and carried it out with flawless efficiency. The feeling on Zarn Prime was surreal. What had begun as a violent retaliation, a mission of vengeance, had slowly transformed. The people of Zarn, who had lived under the iron grip of fear for so long, were witnessing something they never thought possible: a force of unimaginable power, coming not to crush them, but to liberate them. The air was thick with disbelief. In the cities, citizens who had long been forced to cower before the warlords began to emerge from their homes, eyes wide with confusion and awe. The streets that had been lined with military checkpoints were now filled with whispers of relief. "Is it really over?" they asked each other. "Are they here to save us?" What was meant to be a massacre had become an unexpected liberation. Earth had shown them mercy. In the heart of the main capital, the warlords' most loyal soldiers, those who had been ready to die to protect their rulers, stood in stunned silence. They had expected Earth's fleet to rain destruction down upon them. Instead, Earth's justice had been swift and silent, like a cleansing fire, burning away the rot without destroying the foundation. The people of Zarn saw the truth now. Humans were not just avengers of the fallen, they were protectors. They were the enforcers of a higher universal conscience that demanded more than just survival. It demanded honor. It demanded compassion. It demanded justice. On the command deck of the Resolute, Admiral Thorne issued a simple order. No flag would be planted on Zarn Prime. This was not a conquest. This was not Earth's empire reaching out to claim what wasn't theirs. They were not here to rule, not here to impose dominance. They had come for one reason alone: to remember the dead, to honor those lives, both human and alien, who had been lost aboard the Mercy Dawn, and to ensure that no more innocent lives would be lost to the same cruelty. "We are not conquerors," Admiral Thorne said, her voice steady. "We are guardians of what is right." The soldiers and fleet commanders across the Armada nodded in silent agreement. There would be no banners raised, no songs of victory sung. Earth had come for one final act: to ensure that the bloodshed ended and that the people of Zarn could finally live without fear. Across Zarn Prime, the message was clear. The warlords, trapped in their crumbling fortresses, watched helplessly as their grip on power dissolved. They had expected Earth to stop at their borders. They had expected Earth to show mercy, only to fall short. But Earth had proven them wrong. Now, with their oppressive rule crumbling, the people of Zarn could see the path ahead. It wasn't paved with victory or revenge. It was paved with a new beginning. As Earth's ships left the atmosphere, carrying with them the message of peace, the people of Zarn began to rebuild. And for the first time, the galaxy saw what it truly meant to fight not for domination, but for the future. A future free from fear and ruled by justice. From the fire of war, a new hope had risen, like a phoenix from the ashes. Months passed, and the galaxy slowly began to heal. The echoes of the battle above Zarn Prime faded, but the ripple effects of Earth's actions were still felt far and wide. The Galactic Council, once a passive observer in the face of interstellar conflicts, now stood as a united body, moved by the events that had unfolded. The atrocities committed against the UNSS Mercy Dawn and the subsequent response by Earth had irrevocably changed the balance of power, and with it, the very essence of what it meant to protect the innocent. In a historic session, representatives from hundreds of species gathered, their voices resonating through the chambers. With unwavering resolve, the Mercy Accord was ratified. This new treaty would forever change the rules of war. It ensured that no non-combatant vessel, be it a hospital ship or a diplomatic envoy, would ever again be caught in the crossfire of conflict. Any aggression against such vessels would be met with immediate and unparalleled consequence. The symbol of the eye, UNSS Mercy Dawn, a shining emblem of compassion and hope, now marked every hospital ship in the galaxy. The sight of this emblem, once a mere badge of Earth's peaceful intentions, now carried a weight of power and justice that no one dared ignore. Humanity, once the youngest race in the galactic community, had transformed in the eyes of the universe. No longer seen as mere newcomers, they were now viewed as the moral guardians of the stars. It wasn't through domination or conquest that humanity had earned this place. It was through an unwavering commitment to protect those who could not protect themselves. It was through standing firm when the line between right and wrong was crossed. Admiral Kira Thorne had never sought the title of Guardian, but in the months following the events at Zarn, it became clear that Earth had become exactly that. The fleet that had once been a symbol of vengeance was now a beacon of hope. The people of Zarn Prime, once bound by fear, had taken up their own cause of rebuilding, not as subjects, but as free people who understood the cost of peace. The warlords who had once controlled their fate were now nothing more than a fading nightmare. The galaxy, watching Earth's actions, began to see humanity in a new light. What was once thought impossible, compassion in the face of overwhelming power, was now a reality. The next time a hospital ship passed through the stars, the entire galaxy would remember what had happened. The Zarn, the Varan, the Chrome, all knew that Earth was no longer a planet to be taken lightly. But more importantly, they understood something far greater. Earth had shown them the value of compassion, even in the darkest of times. It was a lesson no one would ever forget. As Earth's fleets returned to their homeworld, there was no grand celebration, no victory parade. There was only quiet reflection. The price of peace had been paid in the lives of the innocent, and Earth's answer had been one of unwavering resolve. And though the warlords had fallen, and the people of Zarn had begun to rebuild, Earth had made a new oath, a promise to the stars. Never again would Earth stand by while innocents suffered. Never again would they allow tyranny to fester in the darkness of space. The promise, unspoken but clear, was carried on every ship, in every heart, and in every action. The galaxy was watching, and Earth had made its intentions clear. They fired on a hospital ship, so Earth answered with a fleet of fury. But the fury had passed, and now a new mission began. It was no longer about fighting for vengeance. It was about protecting the galaxy's future. And humanity stood ready, stronger than ever to fulfill that promise.